So this is today. Today is yesterday, and tomorrow is also today.
You traveled through time to the present.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think you get how time travel works.
It's like we're stuck. You know, like a needle on a scratch record.
I wake up every day right here, right in Punxsutawney, and it's always February 2nd.
It's one of those infinite time loop situations you might have heard about.
It's a thing where the same day keeps happening.
Time.
Slow down! What are you, in a damn time loop or something?
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again. And that must mean that I'm Professor Robert E.G. Black, and I'm here with Brian Boucher from Top Gun Minute, here to discuss Groundhog Day. Again. Still.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
For me. Welcome.
Yeah. Well, I hope I do okay, because I have this splitting headache like somebody hit me over the head with something.
Might have been a snow shovel. Might have just been a time loop.
Maybe.
I assume you saw this movie before recently. It's older.
Oh, yes, many times. Not as much as you.
Right.
But I've seen it lots and lots of times.
General thoughts?
Oh, I love this movie. It's great. I'm a huge fan of time travel movies and time loop movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably not as much as Bubba Wheat.
Yeah.
But still a big fan.
Yeah. And
Big fan.
Bubba Wheat was on this show, minute 3?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure I'll have him on again, and I'll be on his show again because, he's dealing with time loop things, and I'm collecting them.
Most of life is just junk, right? It's filler. And then there's these moments when all the randomness turns into something perfect. It's like life's dropping all the bullshit just for a second to show us how amazing it could be all the time if it wanted to.
I don't know. I think maybe we're supposed to become like better people. Though I honestly don't even know how that could be possible.
Ever think about it? We must miss so many of them. All those tiny perfect things are just poof, gone, lost forever. But not today.
That is a disturbingly inspirational idea, Mark.
It's a perfect day. You couldn't have planned a day like this.
Well, you can. It just takes an awful lot of work.
Time.
The last revision is what counts, apparently.
What if we found them all? All the perfect things in this one town, in this one day. We could collect them.
You haven't heard minute 17 yet.
No.
Listeners would have. But that was pre-written, word for word myself.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was doing minute 17 that week by myself. I had my time loop of the week. I went into detail describing every frame of it in case they didn't feel like going and watching it, even though it was like 4 minutes long or something.
Mm.
I still had to interrupt with a second time loop of the week because I had just discovered a new one. Like, why does this happen?
Yeah, you're not a slacker.
Right. Plus, if I only did one time loop of the week every week, we wouldn't get through all of them.
Yeah.
I think I put the link in the group on Facebook, but I have created a list on IMDb of time loop movies and TV episodes.
Yes.
And I think it's around 200 right now I have on there.
Wow.
And I still have to add some. I just discover, new ones happen and old ones. I can't even put books on there. One of my favorite books is Replay by Ken Grimwood, which is basically a story of a guy. As he dies, he wakes up again. Like, I think at the beginning, it's like 30 years earlier in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets to repeat that whole segment. It's something you couldn't do very well in a movie because it covers too much time.
Yeah.
And then that loop kind of gets smaller each time, but it still takes a while. And he figures out things to like sporting events to bet on. We'll talk about Back to the Future later and things like that. And actually we could get into time loops now since I already did. We could start there.
That's fine.
I didn't expect to talk about Replay today. It's basically he's with a different woman than was his wife the first time. And it's been a while since I read the book, but I think it comes down to like the next time he wants to be with the first wife again. And he keeps wanting to repeat things that already happened and maybe coming to the conclusion that he did it okay the first time, which is a nice thought for a time loop.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Connor's loop. He's not in there because he's a bad guy. It just happened. And so it's fun. Jumping in from editing because anyone who's read the book here and remembers it well, would realize I didn't quite describe replay very well. I mean, I hadn't planned to discuss it, and then it just kind of came up in the conversation. Judging by the Wikipedia, I didn't go back and reread the book. I should. I loved the book when I read it years ago. Haven't read it in a while. But it's a bit more science fiction and less about the original loop and more about a second, maybe third person that also is in these loops, these replays. And there's stuff in the description of the plot that I completely forgot was there. And then was like, oh yeah! Like, Star Wars never happened because this other person hired Steven Spielberg and George Lucas to make a different film in 1974, and it changed the way their careers went. And, yeah, I should read that again. Anyway, I guess it's okay if I don't remember the loop, or the story, or the time loop movie, or whatever quite perfectly, because that's also sort of the point. Is that each time loop uses this same structure to tell arguably the same story, even though all the stories are different. The details change, the beats remain the same. It's all about the repetitiveness of life outside of a time loop. Constant struggles to be who we are and deal with other people. The themes and genres you can play with, that just makes it more fun. Back to me a month or whatever ago. Take it away, past me. I like time loops because they're an easy way to universalize weird circumstances. Like being stuck in a small town. Doc Hollywood covers that also. It's not a time loop, but it's the same idea. He's a dick, and then he gets stuck in this little town and has to be a better person. Yeah. And that's nice. Mm-hmm. You should care about your surroundings, the people around you, at least on some level. Yeah. I care about people plenty. Do I talk to my neighbors? No. That would be face to face. Right. That'd be weird. Yeah. Your time loop of the week, you said, was one of your favorite movies.
It is.
Or your favorite movie.
My favorite movie of all time.
Nice.
Pun is intended.
Yeah. Of all time. Yeah.
Yeah. Back to the Future.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie probably just about as many times as you've seen Groundhog Day.
Nice.
I was in the military and I was in Korea for a year, and I pretty much watched it every single day. And while I was there, and that was in 95, and I've probably watched at least one of the movies out of the trilogy like once a month my entire life.
Nice. Back to the Future is a good one, just as movies go, because its script is pretty much perfect.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing happens in that script that doesn't set up something later.
Right.
Or that doesn't get a payoff later. This movie comes pretty close to that.
Yeah.
This is a little more improv, so it's got some randomness to it.
Yeah.
Back to the Future is more planned. If you're going to do time travel, you better pay attention to your details, and they did.
Right. And even if the payoff isn't in the first movie, when they came out with the second and third, some things pay off in those movies.
Yeah.
You know, you have to wait to the next movie for it to pay off.
Yeah. And the first one on its own it's different as far as what we've talked about with time loops so far in this show, in that it is a single closed loop.
Yeah. The first
movie. Second movie gets a little more of the repetition of loops, and
right.
The ending of the third suggests you could do a lot more with it. And there was a video game of Back to the Future 10, 15 years ago. I've never played it. I just saw someone playing it, which I'm guessing has a little more of that where you can repeat things over and over.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of, when we were talking about this, you know, you thought like a closed circuit time loop kind of thing. We dub it the Marty McFly loop. It's also kind of like the multiverse loop type.
Yeah.
Because unlike Phil, who has, you know, it's the next day as a trigger or a death.
Yeah.
He always wakes up at the same time, the same day. This one's more of a loop, but then Marty McFly A gets to go on, where Marty McFly B gets to go into the loop.
Right, which is also fun in that they don't really explain their time travel logic until the second movie.
Right.
Which wasn't really planned. They didn't, even though they say to be continued, it was more of a joke at the end.
Yeah.
And I've heard it wasn't even there when it was first released, but I don't buy that because I swear we saw that on the screen at the Man 3 in Hastings Ranch. We sat for the credits or whenever it said to be continued.
Yeah.
And we were like, yeah, we were excited.
Yeah, seems like I have the same memory.
Right.
But I have gotten to see Back to the Future on the big screen at later times. So maybe it, That's what I'm thinking of.
And you've said you watched it so many times on video, as I haven't watched it as many times on video, but seen it many times.
Yeah.
With that to be continued and knowing in context, they went ahead and filmed a 2 and a 3.
Yeah.
But at the end of the film, it's actually kind of interesting and maybe a dark turn in a way that Marty doesn't remember everything that has changed in the meantime since 1955.
Right.
He doesn't expect his parents as they show up at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's going to be difficult. It'd be like when I talk about Phil getting out of the time loop in this movie.
Mm.
Going back to living day by day is going to be very hard.
Yeah. And you got to deal with whatever consequences that you started on that last day.
Yeah. Which is my favorite part of the Italian remake of Groundhog Day, is that on the last day, he buys a bunch of sheep thinking he doesn't have to deal with that. And then a bunch of sheep show up in a truck.
Yeah. Yeah. But with Marty and Back to the Future, he comes back, and then Marty B has to go back to 1955. But this Marty B has lived a life of, his parents are actually in love with each other. And you don't know if they got to tell them the story of the enchantment of their sea dance.
Well, and if they did, if he remembers it.
Yeah.
Like, did that memory transfer over at some point?
Right. But this Marty can go back to 1955. And if he doesn't know the story of Biff and George falling out of the tree and getting hit by Lorraine's dad, he may not be able to fix their relationship.
Yeah.
And could cause a paradox that they talk about.
Yeah.
Messing with the space-time continuum. Or he could fix it. But then you also get the kind of the butterfly effect, because if any one thing could happen and he might not make it back to the clock tower and be able to go back to the future.
Right. Yeah. The second film, he could have messed up what he did in the first film.
Yeah.
And ruined it all.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the problem when you have a time travel versus time loop where you get two different versions of people.
Yeah.
Which we also get in the time loop of the week I picked for this week, which was a short film on YouTube called I'm You, Dickhead, which is about a guy who goes back in time to convince, was it his 10-year-old self, to learn how to play guitar.
Yeah. To impress
so that he
girl.
can get yeah. And then that doesn't immediately work. So he goes again and he goes again, and multiple versions of him all end up in the same birthday party.
Yeah.
And it's hilariously silly, especially because I didn't even realize until watching it again just this week. Half the movie is up to that first time he goes and meets himself as he's 10. And then all of the other variations happen so fast that it is just insane to think about how like quick and weird it is. And it gets into, trying not to spoil it, grandfather paradoxes would be a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And just runs with it because it's funny.
Yeah. It's a little problematic, but it's funny as hell.
I might include, there's a line at the end of it I might just throw in at the end of this episode, just because out of context, it's hilarious, where it explains what happened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, but I was laughing the whole time. And it's 11-minute long short film.
Yeah. Even the beginning, he's telling some old guy, the old guy's like, yeah, I want to go back and meet my mother again and say goodbye because I never got to say goodbye to her.
Yeah, it's so sweet.
And it's so heartfelt. And then he's like, yeah, I want to meet my 10-year-old self. Don't learn guitar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah. I want to get laid. Yeah.
And then just the randomness of it is that traveling in time, one of the side effects is you have a mustache. So each time he travels, his mustache just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can tell them apart. It's like Clementine's hair color in Movie Tomorrow.
Yeah.
I do have to add an extra time loop of the week. Not that I've already haven't, because I talked last week about the video game Life is Strange, and I have since played episode 2. One of the funny things is there is a scene in a diner, just like Groundhog Day, where in order to prove to my friend Chloe that I could reverse time, I had to predict 4 things happening, and I had to have at least 2 details right about each one. If I messed up anyone, she wasn't convinced, and so I had to do it again. And it was actually really hard to do the first time, because I'm like, I don't know these other people's names. I'm like, I don't know who dropped that dish. I wasn't watching. So I had to watch it again and see who dropped that dish, who did this. It's like, predict something about the jukebox. I'm like, I didn't see what happened with the jukebox. It's off to my right. I wasn't looking that way. So it actually got really hard. And so more respect for Phil Connors later in this film.
Yeah. I do want to mention that in Back to the Future, Part 2.
Oh, right.
Elijah Wood had his first movie appearance, and we'll get to see him tomorrow.
Yeah. A lot older.
Yes.
Back to the Future 2 was what, 88?
89? I think it was filmed in 89. It came out in 90.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's a little kid in the
diner.
I guess that's also a diner. Yeah.
Yeah. In the cafe 80s.
More diners.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for Groundhog Day this week, we had Phil outside in the snow last week, and now he's on the phone at the gas station. By the way, the 76 gas station a block from the square in Woodstock. There is still a gas station there, but I think it is a different brand now. Or at least it was 8 years ago whenever I was there. But it is still a gas station.
Yeah.
And he's just explaining, I'm both. I'm a celebrity in an emergency. Can you patch me through on that line, please?
Is he though? Is he really a celebrity in emergency?
Well, people recognize him later.
That's true. But it's like, okay, where I live in Indiana, and it's like the weathermen on the local TV stations.
Yeah.
They go out and you see them everywhere doing little things. Like I said, I'm from Indiana, so they do things with the Colts and the cheerleaders, and they go to car shows, and they do all these fun things all the time. And they go out. There's one that lives here in my hometown, and you see him in the grocery store, and you're like, oh, hey, I saw you on TV yesterday. But Phil Connor is, from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
He only goes to Punxsutawney once a year for the last 4 years.
Right. They might tune in to his station, but there's a few stations in Pittsburgh.
Right.
There's a few stations around Pennsylvania. They're closer to Pittsburgh than Philadelphia, but I don't know what signals they have, what cable they have. They might be watching WGN out of Chicago.
Right.
We don't know.
I mean, they could be watching the New York stations.
Yeah. They get their weather from the Today Show. They don't have to know this guy.
Yeah.
But he's going to use whatever he can. That was my point last week, is he is so desperate to get back to Pittsburgh when his life in Pittsburgh is not great.
Right.
We don't learn much about it in the movie, but we can infer a lot based on his behavior.
Yeah. Well, obviously he doesn't want to go back to his job.
Yeah, he wants to be bigger. Yep. He wants New York or LA.
Yeah.
Or Chicago.
Or the Home Shopping Network.
No, he's going to end up on the Home Shopping Network. I don't think he'd want
I don't know if the Home Shopping Network would take him. Because if you ever watched the Home Shopping Network, they are pretty to the point. They don't joke around that much.
Yeah, they don't have time for that.
No.
They got to be reminding you what's available and what kind of deal you can get.
Yeah, they are salespeople. That's what they are.
Yeah. He could probably do that kind of thing well with some training, but I don't think he'd enjoy it. I think he'd hate it more than his current job.
Right. And he seems like he thinks he can control the weather.
Mm-hmm.
But we see him at the beginning of the movie, the way he was putting in the forecast out there to the world was not that great. So I couldn't imagine. Why does he think he's such a great weatherman? Because all he does is goof around.
Yeah, I can imagine he's got an audience, but I don't know that audience would follow him to a bigger station.
They watch him to laugh, and then they switch over on commercial to get the real weather.
To get the real news, yeah. They switch to the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
Girl walks by at the bottom of the frame, and the gas station attendant who's been shoveling outside turns his head to look at her, slams the shovel into Phil's head.
Ouch.
Do we get an apology? No.
No.
Acknowledgement? No.
No.
Which just makes it funnier.
Yeah.
Instead, we cut.
Yeah.
We get a establishing shot of the Pennsylvania Hotel, and then we go inside the bar inside, although in the script, we actually get another scene. Rita and Larry are talking in the town square at a booth selling hot cider, and we get a setup of the chainsaws and the ice sculpting. They are surrounded by 25 ice sculptures, many of groundhogs, and Phil says, "My Idea of Hell" by Phil Connors. Rita says some of these are great, and she gives him a cup of cider. He says, "This town is a time capsule somebody buried 100 years ago, and no one's dug it up yet." She tells him, "Cheer up, Phil. The day is what you make of it, right?" Which there is her spelling out the theme of the movie, essentially.
Yeah.
In the film, that's pretty close to minute 17. In the script, I think it's page 24, 25, so it's a little off, but close enough. You usually want a character to tell you what the movie's about, but you don't want it to be so obvious that we know that's what they're doing.
Right. Like the voiceover that they wanted to put in it in the original.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a little too much on the nose. At this point, if you're watching this movie and somehow you've avoided knowing what Groundhog Day is about, you still don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You can guess, and I said this last week, you can guess he's going to get stuck in this town, but it might just be literal. The weather gets him stuck for an extra day and he learns to like it, or a week. They get snowed in. You don't know it's going to be supernatural. But still, the theme is correct. The day is what you make of it, because he doesn't do well with his day. Even in prior to the final revision of the script, he didn't even drive in the van to get here.
Right.
He rode in his own vehicle following along
Mm.
and spent the whole time calling people on his car phone, because that's who he wants to be. He wants to be a big player, and he's not good at it. Well, I guess he's okay at it.
I was wondering though, when he was making his phone calls,
Yeah.
because so there was no long distance lines available, even for celebrities and emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think maybe he might have a friend that doesn't live that far away that he could call that's not long distance and say, can you call this person or this person just to play telephone, get that.
I don't even know how all that would work. What they're implying here, and I don't know how true it would be at the time in a small town, is that he is connecting literally to an operator in Punxsutawney.
Yeah. It's like one of them old timey telephone operators.
Like where they take the little wire out and plug it into a different hole, and they're like, yeah, none of these are working.
Yeah.
So they can't do anything for him. There aren't physical lines to get anywhere else.
But that would tie into that little deleted scene where it's 100-year-old time capsule.
Yeah.
It's stuck back then.
It is stuck in the past.
Yeah.
That scene continues where he pours out his cider and says, tell Larry to go get us some bourbon. And Larry says, hey, I'm not your guy. I don't have to do that. And then Larry turns to Rita and says, would you like some bourbon, Rita? She's like, thanks, Larry. I like that they did have a setup for the ice sculpting already in the script. And there was a nice exchange between Larry and Rita. Larry cares.
Yeah.
He's just annoyed by Phil.
Right.
Because he's worked with Phil.
Right.
And in the bar, we get a couple bits of dialogue before what we see. It's a callback to a scene that already got deleted, where Phil is telling now Nancy the hurricane story that he was telling at the diner before. And the bartender knows the punchline. And I don't know if it's supposed to be telling us that the bartender is clever or that Phil has been telling this story every year. Maybe both.
Maybe.
Because the bartender does seem to, he's used to seeing this kind of guy. Because before we go back to the Cherry Street, he's wiping his glasses and just like shakes his head at Phil because he sees these guys at the bar all the time. They're all the same. So Phil specifically says to Nancy when she has to go, don't you want to see the inside of the van? Which is weird because as many times as I've watched this movie and as many words as I wrote about it in my blog, day 205, let me just drop a tip here. I specifically argued that Larry, when he's talking to Nancy at the end of the film, is an echo of Phil before the time loop. When he was literally an echo of Phil, he says the same line and I didn't even notice. I should have caught on to it. And it's also possible a bartender has a name, which I love. Most films, I complain. Mandy Sucks Minute was all about me complaining that the characters had no names, including Mandy. It's just not her name. Can't get past that. The bartender might be named Frank. And the part we don't get, Nancy says, thank you for the drink, Frank. She might be talking to Phil. That's what Phil thinks. Or she might be talking to the bartender. Don't know because the scene got cut out. And then we get to what we get in the film, which is, I guess, an ad-lib line. Can I have one more of these with some booze in it, please? Ooh, I like it here. And then Rita comes in and asks Phil if he's going to the groundhog dinner. It's like, no, I had groundhog for lunch. Wasn't bad. Tastes like chicken. You two run along. And then we get another ad-lib. Not necessarily ad-libbed on the set, but not in the script. Wow, Larry, looking foxy tonight, man. Hey, is your troupe going to be selling cookies again this year? And we can see that Larry is used to this. He's like, ooh, that's so funny, Phil. It's his sarcasm. Rita asks, so what are you going to do? And Phil tells her, I think I'm going to go back to my room and take a hot shower, which is what he says in the script. And then he adds, and maybe read. And I love that Rita is already getting up. She is not putting up with him. Even before he says the offensive part, he says, maybe read Hustler or something. She is already getting out of her seat and leaving. Yeah. Says, suit yourself. She only met him yesterday morning and she's already done with his shit.
So groundhog tastes like chicken.
Well, yeah, allegedly. Well, we could find out. I mean, technically, the first official Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney was a hunt where they hunted groundhogs and ate them. As he says later, he says it flippantly, but it's true. They hunted them. So could probably find out what they taste like.
Yeah. It could be he's living in the Matrix.
Everything tastes like chicken.
Everything tastes like chicken. That's it. It's the only thing they know. So they only know what chicken tastes like. So everything tastes like chicken.
This bar was a working bar that is in the courthouse building. It's not a courthouse anymore, but it was a courthouse.
Right.
And they have tables set up in the jail cells. They had to remove one of those tables for the scene we get in a jail cell later. So this is the same place where he is in jail later in the film. And we cut from there, him saying he's going to take a shower, to him taking a shower, which we get close up on hand turning the faucet, and then we get the outside of the curtain. We don't really see much more of him than his arm.
Right.
As the water is too cold. And then the minute ends.
You're getting in a shower, you know, clawfoot tub,
Yep.
shower curtain ring that goes all the way around. And he just goes ahead and gets in there and turns the water on without testing it.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it's funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
But I don't do that at home. I don't do that at a hotel where I know they're going to have hot water. I need to know what temperature the water is before I'm getting into it.
Right. You could get in there and be, you know, too hot and scald yourself.
Right. It could be too hot. It could be too cold.
Yeah.
I need to know what it's going to be before I get into that water.
You got to be just right.
What does that say about Phil?
He just takes chances on everything, apparently.
Yeah. He doesn't think through what he's going to do.
No.
Which I guess is going to be his lesson. He has to actually think.
Mm-hmm.
So before there's a time loop, this is his first lesson.
Yeah. My parents had one of those claw tub shower things when I was growing up, and I hated getting into that thing because I barely touched that base ring that the shower curtain hooked to. You barely touch that thing, and that thing just fall every single time. And it's like, you know, I got older, and I don't want to take a bath.
Yeah.
You're sitting in dirty water type thing, you know, like,
Right.
That's not me. But as soon as it touched that thing, it'd fall down. And it's like, man, you try to put it back up, and it was ridiculous.
So we already did our time loops of the week. So anything else on Groundhog Day?
I have one question. One question that's always kind of bugged me over all the years while watching this. It's like basically the end of the very first day before he starts looping. We're only going to see the shower scene like one more time, I believe.
We see the bathroom again.
Yeah, we see him in the tub. So the next day, I mean, I don't want to get really too much into it because I know you're going to talk about it. But when he goes to leave, he gets up and everything's kind of, they're playing this tape over again, dummies.
Yeah.
And he runs into the guy on the stairs and Miss Lancaster downstairs. And then he goes outside, and then it cuts to him in downtown by the square.
Right.
So how does he know to go to the square?
So you mean the next day?
The next
as
day,
the loop repeats.
Yeah, as the loop begins. How does he know to walk down to Gobbler's Knob? Because I mean, I would imagine that he would go out and thinking that Larry and Rita's going to be there in the van waiting for him to pick him up.
Yeah.
How long would he stay there before he decides to walk the 3 or 4 blocks it is to Gobbler's Knob to get to the hotel or whatever to find them?
Right. That comes down to also a question of how far away is it?
Yeah.
In the reality of Woodstock, it is several blocks, and a couple of them are kind of long blocks.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a walk to get from the square to where they are in Cherry Street Inn.
Yeah. But like I said about the whole butterfly effect thing.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to also one of my complaints earlier in the film is, why did Rita get dropped off first?
Yeah.
It would have made sense to drop him off and then go to the Pennsylvanian, because I assume Larry's staying where Rita's staying.
Right.
And so they should have dropped Phil off first, but they stopped there because it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
You had to have that funny scene.
Yeah.
Then it comes down to a complaint I had from the original script, why Rita was outside the Cherry Street Inn every morning when she didn't stay there, but she always showed up there to tell Phil he was going to be late. And it was just like this weird extra joke that didn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good question. The next day, the movie doesn't establish well enough that he gets the day is repeating that first time.
Right.
There's a shot in a couple minutes after he knows the tape is repeating on the radio, and he goes and throws water in his face. He looks out the window. And I think it's after he looks out the window because he says, "What the hell?" Because it looks similar.
Mm.
But he turns around and looks around the room. They missed that. We needed a reverse.
Right.
I think it makes it more specific in the script. The reason he realizes that it's even weirder is that his stuff has moved.
Right. It's not where he left it the night before.
It's not all packed and ready to go. It's the mess it was that morning with stuff on the chair. Things aren't where they're supposed to be. But we don't get a shot of the floor with his stuff. We don't get a shot of the chairs.
Right.
Like insert shots or anything. And so he's still kind of freaking out. Why does he go that way?
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. because unless it's close, he has no reason to.
Right.
Day 3, it makes a little more sense. He's panicked. He's just going to do the same thing.
Right.
The second one, I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, if he waited, because I would imagine the very first day he went out and he just started straight walking towards Gobbler's Knob.
Right.
But the second day, you would think, okay, well, it's the next day. Somehow all the snow has completely melted.
Yeah, because it did snow last night.
Yeah. And so he's like, whoa, okay, well, I guess it's time to go home. Why aren't they here to pick me up? Then maybe he run back in, you call over to the hotel, say, hey, why aren't you here? Or something.
Yeah.
After that time, if he would start to walk over there and it would completely put everything out of time. Like I said, the butterfly effect.
Yeah. Well, I can explain it. I can't explain it. I don't think the film explains it.
Right.
Because I think it comes down to later in the film where he brings them coffee and pastries.
Oh.
He takes a long time. He gets up at 6.
Yeah.
The groundhog reading is at 7:20.
Yeah. So he has an hour and a half.
That's a long time. I think he stops at a coffee place every morning and we just don't get to see it. So it might not be that he goes to the square. It might be that he goes to that coffee place because he still wants coffee in the morning.
Mm.
Even though he's had the coffee at the Cherry Street. You broke it. That's one aspect of that I didn't really think about, which maybe makes me rethink my dislike of Rita being outside Cherry Street in the original script. Is she needed to be there to remind him where he had to go, so that even on the first resumption, he went and did it again. Yeah. Good one. You get the no prize.
Yay.
So that's good. Anything else on Groundhog Day?
No, it's a great movie. And I enjoy it every time I watch it.
Yeah.
Even though I know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
It's still really fun to watch. And like you said, every time you watch it, you see something a little different.
Yep. Or notice something in the script that I didn't notice before. And I've read 5 different versions of the script. 4. There are 5. I've read 4. The other one doesn't really exist.
Well, I like watching Back to the Future because after all this time, I still watch it and I still catch little things every single time I watch it.
Yeah. Which is always nice.
Yeah.
You can't go into the same movie twice. That's my motto. So until tomorrow, when we come back to talk about another movie, where can listeners find you?
I am at Top Gun Minute Pod on Twitter, Top Gun Minute on all your podcatchers, and Facebook, Top Gun Minute Listener School. You can join the discussion.
Thank you for listening. The Groundhog Day Project Minute by Minute is just one part of an existential trilogy of podcasts. Tune in every Tuesday for Minutia Ex Machina, every Wednesday for more Groundhog Day, and every Thursday for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Minute. And you can follow all 3 shows in one feed. Just search an existential trilogy. Follow this show on Twitter at Groundhog Day MXM and on Instagram and Facebook at Groundhog Day Project. This has been a production of Lemming Drops Studio. You can find links to more at lemmingdrops.com or join the Facebook group Lemming Drops Studio Tour. Also, you can support all my shows at patreon.com/lemmingdrops. Until next time.
First, I played the game by the rules from 1 to 10. Then you took me round again.
I think I have traveled through time.
What is wrong in the end which never comes? Or which comes again and again, lapping, like waves?
Since the Big Bang set everything in motion, everything that happens in this universe has to be the way it is.
Man, are you hungry? I haven't eaten since later this afternoon.
Particles unfolding the way they're destined to.
How do you sleep at night? You've never seen Groundhog Day?
Yeah, you know Groundhog Day is not a documentary.
Didn't go well, mate. It didn't. My mum freaked out. It was 20 years ago she died, and I come back looking like this. She freaked! So then I went back to stop myself from saying goodbye to Mum. And now she sees 2 of us. She starts screaming, "There's 2 of you! Why are there 2 of you?" It was horrible. She had a heart attack on the spot. I was pretty understanding about it, but me, I was freaking out.
Far out.
So now I have to go back and stop myself from saying goodbye to my mum. I think that's what I have to do. What about you? How did you go?
Well, I learned the guitar,
live with a hot girl now. But I'm also my own stepfather, and I think I fathered my own stepbrother. So, you know, swings and roundabouts.
Jesus Christ. So what now?
Well, I got this parking ticket 2 years ago. It was bullshit.